Okay.
And I'm Jonathan.
And as you know, this is the measure of an episode, where it is our continuing mission to explore what makes Star Trek genuine Star Trek and not just another television show that happens to be animated. I'm Paul.
That's right, Paul. And I'm Jonathan. And this week, we do this with 3 objective criteria. The first is there sci-fi required for the plot to happen? Number 2, is that sci-fi presented in a unique or novel fashion? And number 3, is there a moral or ethical or philosophical debate that a character faces? I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Paul. And this week we watched not 1, not 3, but 2 episodes of The Lower Decks, 409 and 410, or season 4, episodes 9 and 10. There we go.
Is 409 still a thing?
409?
Yeah,
you mean like the spray that you clean your bathroom with?
Yeah.
I'm sure it is.
Okay. I haven't used it in years, and I'm sure you haven't either. I was just curious.
Yeah. No. Oh, wait. It might actually clean your cars too. Like the inside of your car. Like they make stuff. I feel like I've seen commercials for 409 stuff where you can spray your leather seats.
Okay.
And the first name of the 9th episode, what? Is The Inner Fight. And I have to ask Jonathan. This happens all the time with the names of things in the Lower Decks, is we don't know, is that a reference to the Inner Light? Must be a reference, right?
Yeah.
Must
yeah.
be.
The phrasing is intentional. It's got, especially for a show like this.
But has nothing to do with the Inner Light episode at all.
Right. And that's
nothing.
Yeah. That's the part that kind of frustrates me, is like there's no
connective tissue in that reference.
Yeah, but
it's just words put together.
There's no like kind of rhyming element to it. There's no little nod and a wink in any way. It's just there was an episode called Inner Light, and now we're calling this one Inner Fight because there's an inner fight she has. Yeah.
Do you see we did that? Yeah, exactly.
Right. I mean, and I think what really epitomizes that is the Parth Ferengi's heart place. Like they did nothing with the Britcom that is that. You know, it was just, oh, this word kind of sounds like it, and if we do something that's kind of lovey-dovey, we could say there's a heart place here, and then we'll just have a Ferengi named Parth, and he owns the place.
Yeah, see, it's not even an Easter egg either. It's just something that, it's like a little thing in the background. It's like the Where's Waldo version of Star Trek.
Well, yeah,
right? There's nothing. It has zero substance. It's just this very thin 2-dimensional decal that they put on their show.
Well, yeah, like it feels like in the writer's room, like somebody was just like, hang on, guys, I'm trying to think how we can make, like, Ferengi is like Merengue, you know, like that one Britcom show, the Garth Marenghi's Dark Place. Like, what could we do with that?
Yeah, it's not even a pun.
No.
Again, there's nothing connecting that thing. So
yeah,
I don't know how I feel about it. I feel like because the show is good that I'm willing to let it slide.
Oh, sure.
You know?
Yeah. It's fun in that, oh, I see what they did there. You know, like, but it's disappointing that that's all it is. And episode 10? Or no, not yet.
Not yet. Okay. We didn't talk about 9 yet. What was this, a 5-minute episode? Was this a YouTube short?
I meant of the titles.
Oh, okay. So I did notice, and maybe this was on purpose in some way, because it kind of came out of nowhere in a way, is Mariner's reasoning for being so gung-ho about putting herself into dangerous places
right?
Also the same. I mean, so it is the same thing that Mariner does every episode.
Yeah.
In a way. But it's also, they kind of leaned into it a little bit in that she's endangering herself. It's not so much that she is an outcast or wanting to be an outcast and kind of pushing everybody's buttons, but that she's intentionally putting herself in harm's way. And which is something that happens to B'Elanna, or something that B'Elanna does to herself in a Voyager episode. And I don't know which episode that is, or what was causing B'Elanna to do that, or really what the plot was at all. I just know that she was doing that. And because the whole Tom Paris thing happens, or not Tom Paris thing happens.
Nick Locarno.
Yeah. Because that happens, that was a next-gen character, right? That Wesley gets caught up to, gets entangled with, yeah.
Yep.
So I was thinking that maybe this whole B'Elanna / Mariner rhyming thing that's happening is on purpose, but it doesn't matter. But because I think that they would probably argue that no, it's not a reference to that B'Elanna episode because Mariner always does this. She always sabotages herself,
Yeah.
and they always end every goddamn season with her saying, maybe I shouldn't do this anymore. And then the first episode of the next season is her doing the same thing. So
right. Yep, here we go again. Yeah. But I'm hopeful that this time that we actually we quote unquote got to the root of the problem and she was able to address it and actually resolve it, and not just oh, I do this, like, I'm really sorry guys, but actually being able to face what was causing it in the first place. I hope that it's resolved. But
yeah, I didn't get the impression that this was the reasoning for all of her sabotaging behavior. This was just this particular episode's sabotaging behavior.
Well, so what? I mean, yeah. Well, and that's kind of what frustrated me about it is that we've had 4 seasons with her, and she finally mentions what the actual problem is. She's not. This has never been alluded to at all ever. And now for it to suddenly be a huge thing and why she is struggling like this, like, it just seems so weird, especially since we've had episodes that have referenced Tom Paris and she didn't say anything about him looking like, a jerk that she used to know or something like that, and making any kind of even just subtle references.
Right. Yeah, I felt like what ultimately is responsible for Mariner's behavior was retconned in a way for this particular thing because this was a character who we've never heard of. I'm not talking about Lacuna. Is that his name?
Locarno, yeah.
Locarno?
Laguna, yeah.
Bill Laguna. She'd never mentioned him before, and she'd never mentioned this other character who died, apparently.
Cito.
Yeah. Have we heard of her? Maybe just, she has not been someone that I think Mariner has discussed at length at all. So it felt very retcon in that sense of like, oh, this person who was very important to me and had a very large impact on my life and my career in Star Trek was just coming up now. I don't like it when they do this.
Right.
They could have done anybody for this.
Yeah.
Right? There could have been Lacuna himself. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Why not actually make it Lacuna himself?
Well, because the reference was to the Next Generation episode Lower Decks. Like, that's what the flashback was with Locarno and Wesley and Cito, and there's one other one, I forget who it is. But that
was Wesley in that scene where they're at Starfleet Academy?
Yeah.
Oh, I totally missed that. Was it voiced by Wesley Crusher?
Yes, it was.
Oh, I totally missed that part.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't miss it. I saw the scene. I just didn't register it with
Right, you didn't piece it together, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's what that scene was. The scene was coming from the Lower Decks episode where Picard rips into Wesley about the first duty of every Starfleet officer is to uphold the truth or, whatever it is.
Right. I don't see why Mariner couldn't have looked up to Lacuna.
Right. Well, but also why none of this was mentioned before now.
Right, because they had to do this episode. That's the problem, is that I think that they had this whole season to seed that stuff, maybe to have a new character on the actual show. Mm-hmm. And we were complaining about this season that seems to be marking time a little bit, spinning its wheels, waiting for this to end. So why not, if you have the time, do it, right? Why not seed this new character, Sudu, and have her die, and then Mariner gets upset about it, right? Mm-hmm. For at least one episode. Just one episode.
Well, so, right? No. She's the one who died in the Lower Decks episode. Like the Lower Decks episode from Next Generation.
Sure. I just mean if you're going to have a character who means so much to Mariner that it affects her behavior years later, I guess, I don't know, have her be a part of, have her in some way be mentioned.
Right. And it can even be just like in Mariner's quarters, she has a picture of the 5 of them, or just the 2 of them, or something where it's not just completely out of left field. Oh, I've always felt this way.
Right. Well, wait a minute. I thought the friend died upholding. So when Mariner has her talk with the Klingon in the cave on that planet, she says they come to the conclusion that her friend died upholding the values of Star Trek. So I don't know, if she died in that accident, that was just an accident. Like
No,
Is that what, did I miss something? Like, I feel like I
no,
missed something.
I
should have
I'm
watched the show.
right. I know. I may be conflating two episodes because the lower decks episode is not the episode with Will Wheaton. That's completely my bad. No, she was the one who was selected to go undercover, and the lower decks hears about her dying in the line of duty. And I don't know. I guess she was in that group as well.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like we both should have watched this episode.
I feel like we should have watched the extended episodes, maybe to like have a little bit more context to this.
Wait, are there extended episodes? You mean of this episode?
No, I mean
Or-
watched the lower decks episode from Next Generation and whichever episode that was that had Locarno in it.
That's unfair, though, because you know and I know that we are not Star Trek fans.
Right.
We are not those kind of fans.
And for those fans who do not understand what we are saying, we are indeed Star Trek fans. We are just not we do not have posters and the schematics of every ship and are able to reference single lines from single episodes of very short treks.
I feel like I can for the episodes that make an impact, but it's not because I've seen them 12 times. Right. I'm just not, I can't do that for anything. I'm not a fan of that in anything in my life. Like even for my son, I look at one picture and I'm done. You know, I don't relook at pictures. It's boring.
You have no albums, no photos of him in your phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's fair.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So yeah. So here's my new question.
Okay.
My new question for you about this episode. We're moving on from the whole Mariner thing because we apparently don't have all the information. We don't know who these people are. But so they assign Mariner and the rest of the lower decks crew to go work on this weather buoy in orbit. And it so happens that they get attacked by the Klingons and the planet, they get marooned on this planet, which happens to be where all of these people who have been kidnapped, these ships who have been kidnapped by who we find out is not Tom Paris.
Right.
Was that a coincidence?
No, that was they were over there.
They got assigned to fix it because it was like a boring thing.
Right.
But I must have missed some line where they said this planet is in some way connected to Lacuna. And I don't know. Let's just see. Otherwise, if that line doesn't exist connecting that, it was just a coincidence that they happened to pick the planet in the galaxy of planets.
Right.
Of where all of these people were being stranded. So that seems awfully convenient to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's fair.
I don't think I missed anything on that one.
Yeah.
I think that's I don't remember. They had that meeting kind of laying out where where Boimler gets super excited to meet Beverly Crusher.
Right. Well, yeah, and they're going to that isolated place, and then it just happens to be where all the I think you're right. I think that's an astonishing, infinitesimal odds coincidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't. They must. That makes me think we missed something.
Right.
Right. Which apparently we're doing a lot of in this episode.
Yeah. So I figured out why. I actually just did a little bit of reconnaissance, and Cedo is in both episodes. She's in First Duty, where she was with the squad. And that's why she was in that group with Locarno and Will Wheaton. And then also she was in Lower Decks, and she was the one who died.
In the Next Gen episode.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we figured that out.
Yep. We did it. Nice job.
All by ourselves.
Yep.
Yeah. Without the internet.
We pieced that together. Yeah.
We must have missed some connective tissue there.
Well, so Mariner is So Mariner is having that moment with the Klingon talking about her friend who died in the line of duty, and she is connected to Locarno because of First Duty.
So how long did it take you to figure out that when the Lower Decks crew starts encountering all of the aliens, or all of the familiar aliens on that planet, that, oh, these are the people who Locarno kidnapped that we thought were dead from previous episodes? It actually took me embarrassing long amount of time.
Okay.
I figured out when the Binars showed up. I was like,
yeah.
Oh.
I mean, I don't remember specifically, but I do know that solidified it for me. When the Binar showed up, I was like, okay, yeah, these are all the people.
Are you saying that just now that I told you that's when it registered for you?
Yeah, before that's what
I'm
was
getting. Yeah.
just beyond lost.
Or were you watching Lost? And that's why. And the other pane of your, and the other tab of your web browser.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm watching each episode at the speed that makes them 17 seconds long. So
So in between seasons 2 and 3,
Yeah.
you watch this episode. Yeah. Can you stream Lost anywhere? You must be able to. That was a huge show.
yeah, I don't know where, but I'm sure you must be able to.
See, I did it. I had to mention Lost in every episode because I said that I would do it.
Right.
Yeah.
There are lots of things listening through our episodes that you have said you were going to do going forward that we're singular to that episode. It's very episodic sitcom-y, you know. You're like, I will never forget this. And
Yeah.
it's like it never happened the next time.
Well, that's the fun part. You get to call me out on the things.
Right.
You know, it's like studying for the test.
I know. Like I'm the one who goes back and listens to all of these so I can bring them up and be like, hey Paul, do you remember when you said it? You're like, no.
But yeah, it was the Binars where
Yeah.
I was like, oh, these are the people that we thought were dead but weren't.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tough. It's tough with this because with live action, it's the same actor, and you can easily make the connection.
Right.
You can be like, oh, I remember this character from 2 episodes ago when we thought they died. But with animation, all of the Romulans kind of look the same, and all the Klingons kind of look the same. And so for me, I was like, oh, this is interesting. Why are these weird aliens doing this?
Right. Yeah, like they should have
but,
given one of the Ferengi like ear hair or given one of the Romulans a scar, you know, something where it would have been
Yeah.
weird in the brief moment we saw them to have it before they got vaporized, and then when we saw them again and be like, oh, it'd be just like that guy it's the same guy.
Speaking of that, they never get into why there's debris of the ships that they supposedly do, and why were they pulling the wool over our eyes as to they weren't destroying the ships, but in fact they were just doing something else to them. And what was happening, like they never go into what was happening to them. And they never actually, I thought they were going to use that tech in the final 2 episodes when we realize that it's Lacuna who's driving it.
Did they even talk about what the ship was or why it was so different?
He just said he built it and that he wanted it to be entirely disparate from a Federation ship because he is eschewing all connection to that because he's butthurt. For killing somebody and them saying that was bad.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That felt very loose end, and I feel a little manipulated. You know,
Right.
not in a good way.
No, not in a good way. It did not feel like this was the sum of its parts. It kind of felt like when everything was put together, it did not look at all like what was on the box.
Yeah, and I thought that they were looking for that, like I guess they needed the ships to create this armada, this patchwork armada of defectors. But the only reason that they were attacking these ships was to gather the defectors,
Right.
of which there were only 1 on each ship. I guess that makes the most sense. It just feels like sort of a half-baked conspiracy.
Right.
I kind of would have been fine with them dedicating more of each episode to these conspiracies of Lacuna has, what's it called when you go out and get, like usually do with football people?
Recruit?
He's recruiting, I just thought of it, recruiting people to defect, and he wants their ships. So he's manipulating these recruiters to get the ships, almost like a cult. But they didn't do that. It just sort of was a mystery for the sake of it being a mystery because it doesn't seem to matter.
Right.
So I felt like they used too many fingers in manipulating me, not just the right amount, you know?
Yeah. Fondling you?
Yeah. Or, you know, holding, fondling.
Right. Same thing. Yeah. There's no different connotation to either one.
I mean, the same thing.
Well, yeah, like this, it almost felt like they had this great idea, kind of similar to season 1 with Apocalypse, where that really felt, it felt out of left field, but in a justified way, in an earned way. You know, like the ship that was just this Frankenstein of a beast that was able to destroy things, but it was just doing it haphazardly. You know, there wasn't any kind of precision to it. And then we find out that the Apocalypse are the one leading it, and that makes sense. Like they collect the equipment from these other places, you know, and so they had no idea like really how it works or what to do with it. It's just kind of a blunt tool. And it felt kind of like they wanted to do that same kind of thing where it's like, oh, what is this leading up to? But it just, they should, I mean, going back to it, they should have seated Cedo much earlier, and they should have had Mariner take beef with Paris, kind of like, with just her saying, "I can't stand the look of that guy," and
That's
then
a good idea. I love that idea. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and also you could have had, if you had Cedo, you couldn't have Cedo because she actually died.
Right.
But if you had this character who she looked up to on the show, you could have had Lacuna try and recruit her. And so Cedo starts acting weird. And why are you acting weird? And why are you thumbing through files on the computer you shouldn't be thumbing through? And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or even have her try and recruit the Cerritos to Lacuna, right? Like, I mean, I feel like you could have connected all these things happening, especially the fact that this season was kind of a nothing season except for this intrigue that was happening, that was bookending all of the episodes. So I don't know. Maybe that's too much, or maybe we're asking too much of Lower Decks for that.
Well, and kind of to speaking to the person that she admires, it would have been a great callback for Mariner if Locarno had, I don't remember if she's still alive, but if Locarno had recruited her archaeologist friend.
That I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to bring that up actually.
I brought it up?
No, I actually have my notes. You butthole. Oh, butthole. We should bring that back.
What? Butthole?
Butthole. Don't be a butthole. It's like a little edgier than butthead, but not asshole, right?
Well, but it also gives a same thing. It's a different connotation. Like, if you're being an asshole, you're being a jerk. If you're being a butthole, you're just being irritating.
Right. But yeah, I forget who this character's name was or is, or what she was. I think they were smugglers. Were they smugglers or something like that?
Well, she was like taking all these artifacts and taking them back to Picard.
Oh, right. Well, so there was not so much this particular character, but what that character seeded about the Federation and Starfleet, which was that it might be somewhat morally corrupt, and the things that it was doing were not so idealistic or altruistic, that it really did have these ulterior motives that were not for the good of the universe. And that just went away. That whole concept of we've peeled back the shiny veneer of the Federation and Starfleet and have found blemishes that don't come out, right? Like
Right.
there's something going on with them. And that just kind of goes away. And I don't know if they solved that problem in some episode. I don't remember, but Mariner eventually comes back for some reason, I think to save her mom, right? Because her mom is arrested for something. Am I getting I don't know. Like I said, we're not fans of this show, of Star Trek. But you know what I mean? Like, I feel like, I don't know, they keep dropping things, and I miss, like, all of our theories were wrong.
Yeah.
All of them. And
I mean,
they keep
Locarno was
dropping-
completely out of left field. There's no way we could have. I mean, that may as well have been the jester, from Voyager.
which I am expecting, because what's his name? Michael McKean is still with us, so why not bring him back? Although they did just bring him back. They did
I know.
have him back.
Yeah, they brought back the character and they didn't bring back Michael McKean for the voice. I hope that's because Michael McKean said no and not because they didn't ask.
I'm sure they asked. They must have asked. He just wanted too much money.
Right. I hope so. He deserves it.
He does. He's like one of my favorite 80s actors. I don't know what got me on that rant. Oh, yeah, Mariner's whole thing with that smuggler lady.
Yeah.
So the Indiana Jones lady.
Right.
I guess she was an archaeologist. That's right. That rings a bell.
So we're bouncing all over the place. And the other episode that we watched is Old Friends, New Planets.
Season 4, episode 10. And it just kind of rolls into each other. So we're doing both episodes. So I think that you're right. The Lacuna thread was like, oh, that's interesting. And I recognized the voice before I kind of put together who that character was. Because to me, he's always had such a distinctive voice. He kind of rolls some of his vowels a little bit, that it just sounds like he's from the East Coast, and he's not. He's not from the East Coast. I'm talking about what's his name?
Robert Duncan
McNeil.
Yep.
Yeah. So I've always
Michael Clark Duncan.
Yeah.
Robert Sean Leonard.
So I didn't put it together who he was until like the next episode kind of rolled in. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I forgot he looks exactly like he played a different character on on Next Gen, right?
That's so interesting because I was trying and I could not hear Robert Duncan McNeil. Like I could not hear Tom Paris or Nick Locarno or any of that in the voice. And so I just think it's interesting that you're like, oh yeah, I picked it up almost immediately. And I'm like, I'm watching the whole episode. I'm like, this could have been anybody.
He has like these long vowels that he does. It's like long vowels. It's like that. It sounds very East Coast Jersey to me. And he's not. He's like from not even anywhere close to the East Coast or something like that.
I mean, maybe being immersed in Jersey as you have been in these past few years, like you pick up on that more than I do because I don't hear it. So
no, well,
yeah.
Anyway,
Anyway,
Jersey deaf,
right? Yeah.
But I thought it was an interesting thing. I mean, it's on brand for this show where they find these kind of obscure little Star Trekian Easter egg types of things and make an episode about it.
Yes.
Right? And I like it. I like these types of things. I like when they do this.
Yes, me too.
This was clearly something they thought up of, okay, this is how the season is going to end.
Right.
Right? This is, we want this character. They probably have a board of all these kind of obscure references that they're like, okay, we're going to use this one on this season. And this is enough. We can milk enough out of this particular reference to make a whole 2-episode arc, etc.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the writers even said about that. Like they kept this completely radio silent. They didn't air it for anybody. They didn't give any stills or anything because they didn't want anyone to know how this season was ending. But I wonder if that was almost to the detriment where they didn't seed enough in the episodes before it because they wanted this to be such a shock, such a twist.
And they totally could have. They could have made it anything they wanted. Right? They could have even misled us like a red herring in some way.
Well, they did with Peanut Hamper and Agamon.
Badgie.
And Badgie, yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
You know,
Right.
and so like to have that twist in episode 7 and then to go into caves and then for these 2 episodes, like it just they did give us that red herring. I just wish that they had. I mean, maybe there are deeper fans who understand Lower Decks' vibe now. And they would have pieced it together, but I best case scenario, there would have been people that was like, boom, called it, and not been like, yeah, I knew this was going to happen.
You can't possibly have called this. There's no way.
I'm just saying if they had seeded things throughout, you know, people who have watched,
right.
you know, like, okay, they've got Mariner, you know, here's this picture of these 4 people plus Mariner, and here's a picture of her with this blonde girl. We don't know who it is, you know, and her saying like, seeing Tom Paris, and she's like, I just don't like his stupid face. Like, you know, they could be like, oh, is this leading up to Lower Decks? Is this leading up to First Duty? You know, it would have all been speculation, but you know, there's nobody who could have said like, based on these things, this is what's going to happen. You know, it just would have been, I think this is going to happen. And I think that they were trying to avoid that. And so in the process, this almost feels unearned.
Oh yeah. I mean, you mean the reveal?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's as if they could have taken anybody because they didn't, it wasn't, as you said, it wasn't seated at all.
Yeah.
There was no, you know, they wouldn't have even had to retcon anything. It was just, oh, we didn't give you enough information. Just like we've been complaining before that, okay, it's the same thing over and over again when they're stealing the ships, right?
Yeah.
Or at the time, we thought they were just destroying the ships.
Right.
So, there's not anything. You didn't even need this whole bookending of the ships being destroyed because it doesn't really have much of an impact on anything.
Right. You could have even just had these ships like issue a distress call and then they go and there's nothing. There's no warp trail. There's no subspace, anything. You know, it's just the ship is gone.
And that teller scene in this episode where they assign Mariner to the weather buoy, that would have been 2 lines from Captain Freeman of they've been sealing ships from all these. They actually say it. They say it. You actually could have cut out all the stuff from the previous episodes because they handle it in that teller scene.
Right.
So something occurred to me though in these last 2 episodes. It felt way more Star Warsian than Star Trekian.
Yes. Yeah. Especially the last episode. The last episode felt so Star Wars. Yep. Oh yeah. No. And even episode 9 where they're on the planet. That's right. Yep.
Yeah, and they go to a desert planet where they have to go into a cantina, and there's all these weird aliens, and there's that character who ends up being the engineer guy, who I thought was really cool, who feels very much like whatever that character was that Leia was in in The Empire Strikes Back, or just some character from the new Star Wars stuff that
Right.
just feels very weird and otherworldly. And they're kind of going through asteroid fields, and they're chasing ships. Like that's not really Star Trek.
But also, I did like the alien puppet.
Yeah.
But I wonder too, like them talking about they wanted to make these episodes like really big. I wonder if that's just kind of where Star Trek would go if, well, I mean, I guess so, if you just made it like battles. But even there, like Star Trek movies have had battles. And there was Wolf 359 that we saw a couple times. And it does not feel Star Wars in its scope. It feels big.
I think because it's not quite as kinetic. Like these were very kinetic chase scenes that were happening in these episodes. And when there's a battle, it's usually Picard standing up, not moving. Like maybe something will rattle him and he'll kind of move around. But then they're like, shields, what's our shield status? You know, there's a lot of talking in these battles in Star Trek, and there's a lot of strategy.
Right.
And I think that it's a lot of people standing up and getting up from their chair and leaning forward, and and they're kind of trying something out that is, you know, like the Picard maneuver or the Riker maneuver or whatever.
Right.
And with Star Wars, it's just very kinetic and lasers and dodging asteroids and all that kind of stuff. You know, it's like if you juxtapose the asteroid chase in Empire next to that booby trap
right.
climax where Picard is just driving slowly through an asteroid field.
Right. But I think also to that respect, like if you watch the opening battle scene in First Contact, you know, that's also still pretty kinetic, but it doesn't feel like Star Wars.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. I think because it is kinetic, but it's still kind of slow moving,
Yeah.
I guess. Like you don't get a sense that these ships are going particularly fast.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, they're just sitting there in front of the Borg, just doing what they can to destroy it. But I think also there is the laser aspect of it. You know, like you're right, because Star Wars is like pew 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 pew, and Star Trek is just it's almost underwater. You know, where they're like releasing their photon torpedoes.
Yeah, everything feels much more deliberate in
Yeah.
terms of how they attack, and they're not just firing at will. You know, like it's not like you're in a World War II dogfight,
Right.
which I think is what Star Wars was originally inspired by. It's more of okay, we have to think about, like, you know, evasive maneuvers, 1, 2, 5, you know, that kind of stuff, which means just turn left.
Right.
Just
right.
turn left up here. And they're cutting inside a lot more, where in Star Wars, a lot of the action is somebody's head in a cockpit with all hell breaking loose in front of them and behind them.
Mm-hmm.
And in Star Trek, it's people on a bridge sitting down in chairs and standing up and behind. You know, it's like it's
Right.
not,
And doing cartwheels.
they're
Yeah.
not. Yeah, there's not a lot of energy in that part, except for the tension that they create.
Right.
So
right. That's a good point.
that must be why it just feels. But these particular
The tension was coming
episodes-
from the fight, not from the people in the cockpit. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And it was cool to see all the different places that they made up and everything. But they wanted lots of action, obviously, in these episodes, and they got it.
Yeah.
I have a question though. I have a question for
Okay.
you. So the Trinar shields.
Mm-hmm.
What? I feel like that is a reference of some kind that I just don't understand or get. I know that the Enterprise encounters those space shields in certain episodes, but it didn't feel like that. But I feel like he says Trinar, and they mention Trinar a couple of times. Like, oh, that makes sense. Trinars, because it's two binar, whatever it was. Oh, I think because they were triangles. But was that a reference?
No, yeah, it was not a reference. It was just she kind of said it, you know, it's because it's a trio of binars that made it.
That's why they named it Trinars?
Yeah.
I hate that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, Mariner even kind of acknowledges that. She's like, yeah, I guess it slipped my mind because the name is so stupid.
Also, he had shields around a whole section of space.
Uh-huh.
You know how much energy you would need for that?
Uh-huh.
That's the thing. That's what also made it feel like Star Wars. It was like, oh, we have this ship that can suck energy from the sun and also then shoot it at you. It's like, It's not really. It's not how anything works.
And the other part of that too is it's the same thing that we've talked about with Voyager, and I know that Next Generation does it too, where they talk about how there's this barrier in this area that they can't get past, and it's like space is 3-dimensional. You can go up, you can go down, like
Yeah.
and so for this shield to be guarding whatever it's guarding, like it has to be 3-dimensional, it has to be spherical or cubical in some way.
Yeah, it's the same thing with a Dyson sphere.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think people necessarily understand how big that has to be to work. And
Right.
he's got a Dyson sphere of shields around not just a planet, but a whole section of space. But that's, like I said, that's another like Star Wars thing that would happen
Mm-hmm.
that isn't, I mean, without explanation. I feel like if they spent a minute kind of breaking down how he was able to, like, what's his name? Ruther would be like, how does he get the energy to do that? That doesn't make any sense. It's impossible. And then, maybe the tech they stole from a Romulan was like, no, the Romulans were rumored to be working on some sort of extra dimensional energy source.
Right.
And that's how he's able to do it. And that's why he recruited the Romulan guy. He hates Romulans because of X, Y. It's like there's the mythology and there's the sci-fi that they
Right.
just didn't do. He's just, I have these shields.
Well, yeah. So to that point, just thinking about the size of that, I mean, it covered the Detrion system, which is I pulled it up before. It's a 9-planet solar system. So for it to cover all 9 planets, at best, it would have to be disc shaped. But I mean, that's astronomically, literally larger than a Dyson sphere.
Yeah. Well, and you have to encompass the orbits of the planets, not just
Right.
where those planets are in that moment.
Right.
So that's a lot of just wasted space.
Yeah. But to what end? Like, what was the point of shielding it?
I think it just felt very bad guy, very villain, very Star Wars villain,
Mm-hmm.
They loved the idea of Lacuna being the adversary, but didn't put a lot of thought into the mechanics of what he was planning to do.
Well, it was to protect his new fleet, his Nova fleet, and like from anything and everything. But why? Like why the entire system?
Well, and why the fleet? What was the purpose of the fleet?
Yeah.
Was it just to have his own little army, his own little kind of armada? Yeah, they didn't go into it.
Yeah.
They didn't talk about it. And this is the fun part of Star Trek, is these types of details.
Right.
And they could have done this whole season about this. Granted, you probably would have had to introduce Lacuna earlier. It couldn't have been this.
No, he could
reveal.
have been the man behind the mask, the man behind the curtain. He could have just been the mystery villain who is putting all of these things together.
Yep. He could have left a trail of clues that they're always chasing. They're always one step behind this mystery adversary.
The ships could have just disappeared. They had no trace of them, no idea what happened to them. And then it culminates with this solar system, the Detrion system, just disappearing. And it turns out that it's behind this shield. Or maybe the planet and the star, disappear, but the gravitational pull is still being read, so therefore the star is still there. So where did it go?
I feel like they missed the mark. It was a fun episode. It was fun to watch, but
Yeah.
I feel like they missed the mark in terms of it being a Star Trek, proper Star Trek
Mm-hmm.
in a way. It just felt like an
Well, yeah,
adventure.
because it's not explained. He just does these things.
Yeah. And we don't even get the monologuing explanation of why he's doing them.
Well, we kind of did because, he didn't like how he was kicked out of Starfleet.
I guess that's what it's all predicated on, but what his plans were. It's like, I want to rid the world of the Federation. That would have been fine.
Right.
It's like, we're getting the Federation gone. It's like, well, that's a lot to bite off there, but
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
I'll buy it,
Right.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah,
Hang on, there's a scene.
Okay.
There's a scene that like totally threw me off. It's when Tendi is talking with her sister and she makes the deal to come back to wherever she's from.
Orion. Yeah.
To rule if she gets the ship. And which, by the way, once they give her the ship and they're like, it doesn't work, it's a piece of junk, it's just a piece of metal in space.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, so you screwed me on that one. I'm just going to send you a cardboard cutout of me. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
that's the easy thing. I don't know why she felt compelled to keep her word when the other one didn't really keep her word.
Yeah.
That would have been funny.
Yep.
But she didn't do that. I guess they're going to split off Tendi for a couple of episodes. It makes me wonder what they're going to do.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I saw a couple comments talking about it, like, Lower Decks has been changed forever with the loss of this character. And I'm like, we've lost Mariner before. I think twice. Yeah.
And Boimler.
And Boimler. Right.
Yeah, so they
Right.
usually are back by the end of the first episode of the season.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But it's fun to speculate.
Right.
But anyway, so she was talking to her, and the sister, I forgot her name.
To Erica. No. Yeah.
Yeah, Erica. It's funny. I don't know. I'm laughing at it now. I heard it 15 times. She says, "I expect you to keep your word and come back, even if you fail to rescue your friend."
Mm-hmm.
And Tendy's like, "We won't."
Oh, I know.
Like, huh?
Yep.
I have to put together like, "Oh, we won't fail," not "we won't come back."
I know. Yeah, I actually kind of expected that to come back as well. Like, I was thinking the scene should have been edited in a way, where she says we won't, and she says then it's agreed, and then when she sends the ship, she was like, oh no, we agreed that we won't come back. Like,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
but that was
That'd been great.
Yep, I totally took it the same way. Like, we won't. Wait, we
Well,
won't.
did you
fail? We
Yeah.
won't come back.
Oh, so when she said "we won't," your brain had to like backtrack a little bit and be like, "What is she talking about?"
Well,
She just,
I knew what she meant immediately, but I laughed at the fact that there were two expectations, and because I actually just made this realization with myself very recently with my students, and I was like, guys, I do this all the time, and I'm really sorry. And I'll say things like, "Does that make sense? Is anybody confused?"
Right. Yeah, I would never raise my hand. I'd be afraid of what I'd be agreeing to.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was like, guys, I'm so sorry. Like, I ask you questions where you have to give me opposing answers to move forward.
Right. But yeah, fun episodes, fun little two-part ender. I'm glad. I like it when they do two-parters. You know me.
Mm-hmm.
And but I don't think a proper Star Trek
No, I would agree with
episode.
that. Yeah.
But it's good.
Yeah.
I still enjoyed. But next week, guess what, dude?
Are we doing Picard or Strange New World?
I don't remember. Whatever one we left off of. We got to finish them up.
I know. Yeah.
Those are going to stop airing soon.
Right? Well, no, we're going to have some new season or series of something, in the next 6 weeks or so. I'm sure of it. I don't know what, but
Right.
so
Right.
I want to get through these so we can either get back to classic Trek, which I'm also kind of excited for. We've kind of stepped away from that for a while, so I'm excited to get back to it. Or to start whatever the new season is of whatever. Although, you know what? Saying that out loud, I think the strike probably put a pretty strong hiatus on new episodes. So I think we got some
Probably.
time to do some classic Trek.
Okay. All right. Well, we
Or
have-
finally
still
do an
have-
episode of Discovery.
Oh, that's right. We still have Discovery coming. Season 1.
Yeah.
Does anybody care about Discovery Season 1 anymore at all? That's why we're not doing the whole season. We're just doing one episode for the whole season.
Yeah.
But speaking of episodes and whole seasons,
Mm-hmm.
and speaking of YouTube, our episodes, all of our podcast episodes are now on YouTube, the full episodes. And they're not just audio, everybody. You can watch along with a little fun animation.
Starting in episode 2, I think, of Strange New World.
Yeah.
So it's not the
Well,
entire
we'll have
season,
more.
but yeah,
We're adding more.
We
We're
are
adding more and
growing
more.
our library.
Right. And if you like to just watch podcasts, this is, where they have video, like when you watch Joe Rogan or the Adam Carolla podcast or any other podcast. I don't know why I chose those as an example. This is almost that.
Yeah.
Almost that.
And we've got podcast playlists for each series. So if you are particularly fond of just Next Generation, don't really care about Voyager, then you can find all of our podcast analyses and reviews of just Next Generation.
Right. It's amazing. It's amazing. So more
Science.
stuff to do. Okay. Well, I said my piece about YouTube. I've been Paul.
I've been Jonathan.
And this has been the measure of an episode.
All right, we're going to try this. But you already knew that.
The Tom Paris?